Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
Dante.
An inmate at the Jackson Correctional Institution. All calls, other than properly placed attorney calls, may be monitored and recorded. To accept charges,
Hello.
press 1. To refuse charges, press Thank you for using.
CenturyLink.
You may start the conversation now.
Welcome to the Incarcerate U.S. podcast. I'm your host, Dante Cottingham. And this morning I'm speaking to Miss Andrea Jones-Fordd. She's an advocate determined to reform Nebraska's mental health program and parole boards across the nation through a national organization she co-founded called Inmate Lives Matter. Good morning, Ms. Ford.
Good morning.
Thank you for waking up this morning and having a discussion with me.
Oh, no problem.
I have some questions I'd like to ask you to get your perspective on some of the components of mass incarceration in America. But before we get to those, tell us a little bit about Inmate Lives Matter. What inspires you to co-found it?
Well, at the time, me and my friend Lena Trevino, we had a lot going on with our loved ones that were incarcerated. My husband was incarcerated here in Nebraska, and initially I went to school for sociology, so I studied a lot about how the system is supposed to work, but I've never been involved in it. So when I did end up involved in it and realized how none of that I was taught it was even true, I decided I should just help my husband because there were so many other people having the same problem. So we decided that instead of just focusing on our own situation, which wasn't going to change any of the future, that we were going to focus nationally and try to make a difference in criminal justice reform.
Okay. Well, I definitely respect your proaction. What is the current circumstances of Nebraska's mental health programming?
Well, the current circumstances is, honestly, it's kind of frightening, but my husband is kind of caught up in the circumstances, and I had written for the Nebraska Criminal Justice Review an article asking for others to send me, like, if they're having any issues with programming and they're past their parole date. Because right now in Nebraska is mental health scheduled you a program, which right now they're doing it at any time. For my husband, in fact, they did it the day before his parole review, and it seems to be a pattern.
All calls, other than properly placed attorney calls, may be monitored and recorded.
Please continue.
Okay, so anyhow, I got a ton of letters. All of these things, they were taking these charges that were dismissed in court or, proven to be unfounded in court, and they're using that against them for their mental health programming. Mental health is supposed to be good, you would think, but so we have these programs called CWOR and CSOR, one's for violent offenders and one's for sexual offenders. Okay. They're supposed to make them so that they can go back to the community, but my husband's in prison for forgery, and he got put in the most intensive violent program there is. There's no violence on his record. Then I have another gentleman that's written me that he's got put in the most intensive sexual offense program, and he has no sexual offenses. So now they're both past their parole date. They're told they're not allowed to leave until they take it, but yet there's like a 3 to 4 year waiting list. So.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a little unorganized and a little chaotic. What does reform look like to Inmate Lives Matter regarding mental health program? How would you describe reform? What does it look like to you?
Well, I think that mental health programming should not be harming anyone. And I don't know one single person that I talk to across the country that trusts talking to the mental health program at their facilities. Okay. Anything you can say to them is going to get used against you. So what good is the mental health program going to be? I mean, the unfortunate thing is there's so many people in prison with mental health issues, but they won't take the help because they know that if they do, it's going to be used in some way, shape, or form against them during their incarceration.
Okay. And it's my understanding you guys have a march coming up in Nebraska soon. When is it?
We're going to do our march on August 19th, 2017. We're correlating with the Millions for Prisoners March. to abolish the exception clause of the 13th Amendment that, that promotes prison slavery. So we kind of linked up with them when we first started last July. They had been going before us, so we linked up with them, worked to organize some things. I was actually in that leader here in Nebraska to help them out as well. And so we're organizing a march to coincide with theirs, since not everybody can go to Washington, D.C., where they're having the march.
Okay. And where's the march taking place again?
In Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay. And if somebody wants to participate with that, how could they meet up with you? And where's the march starting at? And where does it proceed? Is this like a certain block or a certain street at a certain place?
We're actually currently working on getting a place. It's been a little bit more difficult than we thought to begin with, but we're still working on that detail, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, as soon as you work that out, let us know, and I'll make sure to add it with the information that we post about the march on the website. Okay.
Okay.
Also, tell us about your national parole board reform efforts.
The parole board reform effort, I had an idea that here in Nebraska, part of the problem with even the mental health programming is that the parole board, there's no oversight whatsoever. They can make any decision. It's an act of grace, so there's no rights involved whatsoever. If they just so happen to not like this particular prisoner on whatever day, they can postpone his parole for another year or however long they so choose. There's no oversight, and there's no one they answer to. So I met another gentleman that was also doing parole board reform in Ohio, and we wanted to do the same thing here. So we kind of linked up with him, and he had an idea that we could propose that we add an inmate advocate to the parole board to be part of, like, the decision to speak for them. If there's something not right, they can speak up at that time. And, I mean, there's victim advocates, there's the parole board themselves, but there's nothing that makes sure that the rights of the inmate is taken care of.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense to me. It's one of those things that you kind of look at and be like, well, why isn't it already in place? You know what I mean? If you're serious about having a fair committee and producing a fair result, that's one of the things that you would assume would already be in place. So, I think you're right on point with those efforts.
Thank you.
So with regards to the parole board for reform efforts, to be successful, how would you describe what you guys need? I mean, people, money. What do you think that you need to be successful in achieving that goal?
I think we need support. We need people to, we're probably going to start up some petitions. We need people to say, yes, we want to see this too. We have a lot of prison wives out there that are really concerned with their relationships, but we need them to get involved in, being concerned with prison reform as well, because that also affects them. And sometimes when you're in the situation, as I have been there for, almost 4 years now, it's hard to look beyond that part of the situation. But if they can support us, we can get the word out. That's going to be the main thing. It's going to help us get in front of legislatures that we're going to need to get in front of. Just the show of support, I think, is the number one thing.
So, how have your recruitment efforts been so far? Have you run into problems recruiting? If so, why? Why do you think there's been a problem if that's been your experience?
There is a problem, and it really depends on the area. I think that Texas has done a really good job recruiting. California, some of these places where that there's the bigger issues. Well, here in the Midwest, people, I think, are a little more conservative or a little more private, and so it's really hard. I really have to work on a person to pick them out and be like, hey, let's get public about this, because they're afraid of retaliation and, whatever could possibly happen. So here in this area of the country, I have a really hard time getting people to not be afraid.
Okay. And I understand that, and I can see that. What would you say to the people that wants to participate, that maybe have somebody that's incarcerated or is intimately connected to some of these incarceration issues? What would you say to those people if they're listening? That maybe they don't know, maybe they need to know. What would you say to them?
I would say to please contact us. So we know a lot about what's going on in each individual state. We have some that are kind of primitive. We have some that are really advanced as far as our state groups go. But if someone gets in contact with us, we can find out what the issue is. We can put them to work on something, or they can tell us their story, and we will tell them how to get started. And we'll give them the room to get started in our organization, and we'll also back them up so that they'll automatically have support. So there's 3 ways to get a hold of us. Well, 4, I guess. Social media, of course. We have our Facebook groups. We have one for each individual state. We have Twitter. We also have, for any prisoners that would like to get a hold of us or need help advocating, we have a physical address. That is 700 South 7th Street, Council Bluffs, Iowa, 51501. They can write us there.
Okay. And I'll be sure to put all the information along with this podcast. All right. That's what's up. So tell me. It's also my understanding that you guys that you currently have a lawsuit against one of the prison phone services for excessive fees. Is that correct?
Yes. It's a class action lawsuit that I was just picked to be a part of, which I was kind of excited about. I have a Arkansas cell phone number. That's where I'm from, and I just never changed it. My husband is incarcerated in Nebraska, so apparently they were charging interstate fees for people that had to call their loved one in another state. So the gist of what I see going on with the lawsuit is that they're going after them for these unfair fees. Because, the phone service is regulated, so they have to follow those regulations, which clearly we can see doesn't seem to be regulated well, but...
No doubt. Okay. Well, and that's a big deal. You got states all across the country that's having similar problems. It's a big fight, and so I wish you luck. I hope it works out. And once you hear something, any kind of ruling that you have, let us know, and I'll write you back, and we can have a conversation about it. Okay?
Definitely.
All right, and that brings me to some of my questions. One of my main agendas is to tell people stories about mass incarceration. You got millions of people that's been affected by it, so I think it's important for these stories to get out. So that brings me to my question: How would you describe mass incarceration's full impact on you? How would you personally describe the impact on you?
Aside from just the normal missing your husband and things like that, I have to take my children every week to have them patted down, to have them taken in the visiting room and then told that they can't touch their father in whatever certain kind of way because it's inappropriate, which wouldn't be inappropriate on the street,
Right.
And the thing that I think that I've noticed the most is how much it affects the children that are involved in the situation. So I'm kind of working with another group here in Nebraska called Black Men United, and we're working on setting up a program that will help bring the families together, even though, they're suffering being separated from incarceration, but just kind of help them understand expectations and so on. So I think the family aspect of the whole thing is really strange. Our kids have, they have father-daughter dances they can't go to. At graduations, they can't have their father at, so...
Impact, and I think those are things that people don't think about when they pushing for these tough laws and these extreme sentences. But again, thank you for articulating, because people need to know.
You're welcome.
So how do you believe America's gotten itself into this incarceration crisis? How do you think we've gotten to this place?
we've gone to this place with, honestly, I believe that lawmakers had an idea of who exactly they were trying to target. This started way back, like after slavery, when people were getting arrested for no reason, and it just continued and compounded into the place where it's so out of control that you have all these places trying to fix it with a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And the truth of the matter is the only way to fix it is to abolish the system because it was built up on corruption to start out with.
Okay, I understand. And that's that's indisputably accurate. You can't argue with that. That's the absolute truth. But when you look at it now, where we at, and how massive it is, what do you believe are the first steps of reforming it, changing it, dismantling it? What do you think the first steps are?
I think the first step is going to be taking a look into the laws that is sentencing to begin with, because we have people that are like 16 years old committing what wouldn't even be known like for sure to be a crime. I've seen like some news stories recently, and they're getting like these ridiculous sentences. Like, we need to start with the kids to begin with, I believe, because our children, their minds aren't even developed all the way yet. How can you take somebody who scientifically you can say their brain isn't developed and decide that you're going to treat them like an adult and give them a sentence when you know that, they don't even qualify to be an adult? You don't let them vote. You don't let them make adult decisions. They can't move out and start a life on their own, not easily anyway. But yet, they can commit a crime and be treated like an adult. That doesn't make sense.
Why do you think they do that? I mean, why do you think they do that?
Because there was a point in time when the lawmakers decided that there were things called like super predators, like children that they decided were super predators, and I think it started there. And
but excuse me, that's true. That's true. Okay, I guess the question is, why do the public permit them to do that?
Because we've taken certain groups of people and decided that they don't have a certain amount of worth. We decided we know what they're going to be like when they grow up. We know that, hey, they messed up. Look at everybody else before them messing up. It's time to just stop the buck here. Let's just charge them as adults, get them off the street, and forget about it. Absolutely. It starts in schools, where we're sending kids to alternative schools because they have behavioral issues rather than looking into what is causing the behavioral issues and trying to work them into being able to have regular school like everybody else.
Right. There's an anger almost.
All calls other than properly placed attorney calls may be monitored and recorded.
There's an anger almost. Would you agree with that? There's a tension, some kind of issue amongst a large portion of the public to permit these kinds of policies to be adopted and utilized. Would you agree with that?
I do agree. And the thing that surprises me sometimes is that we'll post things about children getting these crazy sentences. And even my prison reform group, and there's some people, even that have family that is incarcerated, that are like, oh, they're such monsters, get them off the street. I'm like, what do you mean they're monsters? Are they monsters, or was their life circumstance a monster? Like, what created that? And I get so passionate about it because I'm like, these are babies. Like, what are you talking about?
Absolutely. But the thing about the issue is that the truth is more powerful than that anger and that frustration. So distributing the truth is, I believe, is definitely one of the most powerful things that can happen. And that's one of the things that you are doing, your organization is doing, and a lot of other people are doing around the country. Unfortunately, our time has just run out, so I'd like to thank you again for taking the time this morning.
Thank you.
I recently had the pleasure of interviewing your other co-founder of your organization, Miss Miniature. She's a very impressive woman. The two of you are impressive women. I think that the prison reform movement is lucky to have both of you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
To our listeners, I'd like to invite you to this podcast to share your story, your voice, I'd like to highlight your organization and any upcoming events that you're having. Where we're currently talking to some national spotlights, some national news organizations that may be putting a national spotlight on this podcast, which would mean that it would be a spotlight on your events and your story as well. So come on and get in contact with us. And please remember that alone we are powerful, no doubt, but together we are unstoppable. This is Dante signing off with the Incarcerated U.S. podcast, the place where all of our voices come together.
Thank you for the caller has hung up. Thank you for using
CenturyLink.
Goodbye.